Hello, Sean. How's it going?
You promised me an awkward intro.
We haven't even gotten started yet.
That wasn't awkward. That was perfectly natural.
All right. Well, this is another conversation that we're going to have around getting better forever. And in the first conversation that we had, it was about falling in love with that problem, why you're in love with that problem. And today we want to talk about how it actually happens in real organizations. So my first question for you today, Sean, what is an area in your own life that you right now feel compelled to get better at, but you're not there yet?
It's a pretty long list. I've keep having kids,
Just keeps happening.
have kids forever.
Yeah.
Is that what the question was?
That's the question. Yes.
I think parenting is gotta be on my list on this one. And I think that what does it mean to be a good parent is, what is the question even? Is something that I find interesting about parenting.
Yeah.
Is it to be a provider? Is it to be a backstop? Is it to be a kick in the pants? Is it to be is it to be all those things? What is it? And I think it's to be what's missing to some degree, as your kids become, their own sort of fully formed humans, and what each one's missing is different. And so, what to do is different. And I maybe one, like all problems, there's you could be infinitely better at it, and I certainly could be. And so I've only got a handful of years of childhood left in my kids, and so it's hard not to be focused on that.
Yeah. Sometimes I finish the day and, I'll look back and be like, okay, that was a miss, or, hey, that was a win. That was a cool moment. Do you have a moment that you're particularly proud of with how you showed up as a parent recently?
Oh, yeah. Well, it was my birthday 2 days ago. And so this, it's on my mind because it was this week. But Teresa's like, what do you want to do for your birthday? And I thought about it. And so I like to pick my kids up from school, and I never do. It's like I like pickles and I never eat them. It's like in the same category of, I know, really. And if I ate the number of pickles that I like, my appreciation for pickles would suggest, it'd be like 100 times more pickles than I eat.
Yeah.
Same with picking up my kids. And so I said, and I also like to ride the train. And I also like to take walks through the park and go to the beach. And so I did all those things in a row. I took the train. I picked up the kids. They're always, sort of surprised to see me if I pick them up. And so they were, surprised. We walked to the zoo. We were the only people in the zoo, which led to lots of interesting moments. And then we actually walked quickly to see the sunset before running to catch the train. And that felt, it was what I wanted to do. So there was that, but it also somehow felt like good parenting.
Yeah. Love those moments where you feel like I hit it on this one.
Well, I enjoyed it at the very least.
Yeah, totally.
They claimed to, but it was my birthday, so maybe they were being nice.
That's great. And now we know you love pickles. That's good to know.
I do, yeah. Well, allegedly.
Yeah. Okay. Supposedly.
Yeah, my revealed preferences are not that. But.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. Well, we want to talk about getting better, which we are always on a quest to get better, right? I am always fixated on a next goal. I always have a next goal. I recently was training for a half marathon and I got a stress fracture in my hip, which I would not recommend. It's
neither getting better nor forever.
No, it was terrible. Yeah, it was the opposite of what we're trying to do here. And I was in a wheelchair for 2 months to heal it, which was not super fun either. But in the middle of my convalescence for that, I signed up for a triathlon in March.
Good.
Doing a triathlon when
denial is on the stages of grief.
I think that might have been what it was. And my husband was like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, why are you signing up for a triathlon? Right. And I was like, I have to have a vision of somewhere where I know I'm going to be able to continue getting better, even though this part feels really hard. So I love these conversations.
Did you get angry next, right, according to the to the model?
Oh, yeah. Great. I was not an ideal patient. And but I'm getting better. So
Yeah.
anyway, I love the concept around getting better forever and it not just being a short-term kind of gain. So I want to think today about what this looks like in real organizations because the problem never stays in one place. We never actually solve the problem forever and it never
Mhm.
actually stays in one place. It moves and that's not a bad thing. So I'm curious, where do you see the it being a moving target? When we want to keep
Mm.
getting better, how does the target move?
There are to get better forever, you need to embrace two states. One state, I'll call runtime. And runtime is where you leverage what you have to the fullest possibilities. You don't really question it a ton. You aren't taking it apart. You are driving it. And, I'm not the biggest race car fan, but I like race car analogies. And like when Max Verstappen's out on the course, he is not changing the car. He's using it to its absolute fullest potential. That's runtime. And the goal most of the time that we're either individually or collectively working on something, we're in runtime. And in runtime, we are actually not meant to be asking too many questions about should the car be different. We're meant to be asking the question, how do I make the most of this car? And so goes again at all levels that's true, that most of the time you're in runtime and we'd all be better served to just ask, how do we leverage what we have? Like, how do I make the most of what I have as a person and as a team and as a company and as a country, et cetera. But if that's all you ever do, you're going to plateau because you'll get near the limit of what you have and the returns diminish and you'll probably push it too far. But even if you didn't, you would plateau. So you need to couple runtime, which again is all about leveraging the thing that already exists, with what I'll call ritual time. And ritual time is where everything inverts. Instead of saying, how can I leverage what I have to its fullest potential? I instead say, what about what I have isn't good? Like I ask the exact opposite question. And in order to get better forever, you have to tick tock between those two modes. Now, as an individual, that's actually hard enough. I mean, just think of your own self and your life, and you're like, okay, am I mostly just making the most of who I am? And then occasionally, let's say on Sundays, uh, weird.
Yeah.
Uh, but anyhow, like occasion, some relatively small slice. And I think that this idea of like a Sabbath kind of structure, that there's literally 1 out of 7 days that are reserved for ritual time. And hold this thought
Yeah.
about, sort of looking to religion for some ideas on this. But anyways, this idea that 1 out of 7 is the ritual time is about right, I'd say. And then in that time, even as an individual, think about how hard it is to pursue ritual time for yourself. Hard for most people, right? And even if you have a good stretch where you are, observing a Sabbath type day and introspecting, in order to get better, it's hard to maintain it. Or you think all of a sudden you don't need it anymore, right? And so that's at the individual level. Now scale that to a team, to an organization, and now you need to not only get into that state, but you need to sync the states of multiple people. And the reason for that is that what is good in runtime is bad in ritual time, and vice versa. So the exact same behavior on Monday to Saturday on Sunday is wrong,
Yeah.
right? But it's right on Monday to Saturday. Now, think about you're part of an organization that just think about it at the individual level, that if you aren't deliberate about am I in runtime and am I in ritual time, you will question yourself when you need to not. And you won't question yourself when you need to. That's at the individual level. Now, once you have multiple people involved, if you're not explicit about which state you're in, then that means that you can think you're doing a killer job and the better you're doing actually in pursuing, let's say, your runtime objective. If we're meant to be in ritual time, you will be like doing an awful job, an
Yes.
actively harmful job to the mission, and vice versa. And so the larger the organization gets, even from one person to two people, let alone to hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of people, the more explicit you have to be about what state you're in and what the expectations are. Because, you want as an organization to have accountability, right? Like, accountability is critical to anything. I mean, you need it to get better forever. Um, but the accountability it stays constant, but to what does not stay constant. The to what is talking back and forth between, ritual and the runtime objective of leveraging what you have or questioning what you have. And so, the uh I think it's sort of obvious when you say it that way why it's so hard to get right. Because think about how many organizations have you ever led or been part of that have a ritual versus runtime sort of distinction, um, in the first place, let alone are purposeful enough to state it and help people in and out of it.
Yeah.
And I think that this helping people in and out of it is very important.
Yep.
And then in most of culturally, most of our time is spent talking about ritual or runtime. And so we don't generally talk about the ritual time so much. So I think that there's both the how do I get in and out of ritual time, and then inside of ritual time, how do I um, effectively perform that ritual? Because like just toggling into that space by no means guarantees you're going to be effective.
Right.
And it's a vulnerable place to be. And so it actually can do you harm if you're not effective. And so it's sort of dangerous.
Yeah.
And so I think that, like, the most upstream thing to keep in mind is that there are those two different states that are required to get better forever for the reasons that we said. And that I have to sync that state in an organization. But like, that's just step one. Once you figure that out, how to do it well, I think is a whole other matter.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned Sabbath because I think the religious parallels are really interesting, and I wanna talk about the rhythms of this in just a minute. But first is around the how do we head into the ritual time, and how do we make sure that we're set up for success there? I'm always very interested in, like, liturgical calendars of the church, and, right now, we're in the holiday season, so before Christmas, there's a period of Advent where it's like we're getting ready for Christmas. And before Easter, there's a period of Lent, which is we're getting ready instead of just you hit the holidays and they hit you and it's one day, but instead you have a period to get ready so you can actually experience these holidays the way you're meant to experience them, want to experience them. So I'm curious about this idea of how do you prepare people to head into the ritual time, into those conversations? How do you walk into that together? And I really want to think about it from an organizational perspective. If you're leading a team, how do you head into that?
A couple things. One, I think that attempting to teach at every level, sort of, both that the goal is infinite and this is our approach, is good. Now, I hesitated when I answered because I think that you could overdo that. And let's sort of use the church example here. Um, uh, Members of the congregation, pious people, do not need to be um, theologians. That sets the bar so high, and I think is kind of missing the point to some degree. It's actually making a thing that is, largely humane into a thing that's sort of largely mechanical. It's sort of converting a Dionysian concept into Apollo, which we're sort of wont to do. And so I think it's helpful, but not. It shouldn't be the point. Is just to educate around the point of the point of the structure. And if you think about what any given church does, they certainly do their best to educate about at all, but they'll meet people where they are and allow one step at a time. And frankly, if you never really understand how it all works together, that's okay. Um, I think that that mindset is right for continuous improvement, which is you want to be legible. You know, you want the process, the sort of philosophy to be legible, but you don't want to fall in love with it. You know, it's the because that's not the problem. The problem is getting better forever. The problem is not a bunch of people that understand the mechanics of getting better forever.
Yes.
So be careful in that part.
Yeah.
And yet it is morally good to provide access to the ideas. Now, I think that there's a good amount of research that sort of shows that um, rituals are most effective for people when they're received. So, in other words, when they feel like they existed, that you uh, found them, you received them, and that if you pull back the curtain too much, it's like tickling yourself. You know, it's
Yeah.
like your mind will experience the exact same thing differently. Same thing with rituals, and so there is. I'm being careful on this because there's if you don't do it at all, I think that that is violates the golden rule, and if you do it too much, you'll actually uh, rob the ritual of its humanity. And so, like, go 20% of the way there and not
Yeah.
not further. Um, is a longer answer than I expected to give on that particular question.
Right.
So okay, that's the backdrop. I think about transitioning into that sort of liminal space. I think that I generally call it the crossing, and you need a way to signal that we are moving from runtime to ritual time that does two things. One, it gives people a minute, like it slows things down a little bit so that they can adjust their mindset and make themselves more vulnerable. And then the second thing is you need to turn up the beauty of like the aesthetic quality of the moment. And the reason that that's important is that, when you're in runtime, you're just you're just driving the car, right? And it doesn't matter that it's pretty. Like if you see it, I think about this all the time about the NBA. At the height of competition, things get less beautiful. Like, so if you watch the NBA Finals game, it is frenetic and on the edge and appears sloppy, but it's not really sloppy so much as it's just pushing the limits of what they are, and that is not always pretty. Um, Ritual time needs to be pretty because you're looking at things that are ugly,
Mm.
right? So the error is ugly, right? We don't like ugly things. Ugly things make us feel cold and bad and repulsed, right? That's our condition, right? There's a reason babies are cute,
Yeah.
right? And so when you enter into ritual time where you're saying we are choosing to look at things that are ugly, you need to wrap that in a thing that's pretty. It needs to be beautiful, the experience of it, right? Why are churches pretty? Not the only reason, but
Right.
nothing on
You're
this
right.
one,
Right.
right? You need because, you're there to see your humanity and all of its flaws. And so, this is that for organizations. And so, when you enter into this space where you're going to be talking about error and that's ugly, you need to offset it with beauty. And caring aesthetically about that process isn't indulgent. It's human. It's required. Like, that's actually required. Or else, what do you do when you see something ugly? You look away. And if we look away, we're not going to learn from the error,
Yeah.
right? So sort of having an aesthetic care about um, the ritual itself, um, and doing so in a way you don't over explain, so that you give people the gift of just receiving the moment, not like, being described the joke. right? Which
Yeah.
also ruins it,
Right.
right? You want them to just feel this is critical. And then lastly, you need to make sure that uh, the object of the ritual is not a person. Um, right. So you go, you go through the crossing, you go into a sort of an aesthetically nice environment to look at your own error, which is ugly. And that error, if it's a person, again, violates this sort of violence, like anti-violence sort of approach we're using, which is like, no, we need for um, something to absorb the heat of our criticism, not someone. And I usually call that the anti-scapegoat, right? You need to declare something, ideally, or literally have something that everyone's going to focus their attention in that can absorb or deflect the criticism in a way that doesn't tear down the fabric. Back to we play infinite games with teams, doesn't tear down the fabric of it all. Um, and if you do that, right, you're going to sync behavior and be critical together when you should be critical and not critical together when you should not be. But when you're critical together and you do so in an environment that offsets the ugliness of it with beauty and focus that criticism on uh, something outside, that's not a person, right? I mean, then you will get to the insights that um, are sort of generative, that create the better organization. That then, when you switch back into runtime, you can leverage. Like a new thing to leverage will come out without paying any of the sort of violence penalties we talked about before, right? Which are, again, competition and stoicism, performance management, or scapegoating,
Yeah.
and um, and again, do so in a way that creates trust in relationships, does not draw them down. So I think that if you, again, infinite games, any trend line matters, right? And so if you say, on a 1 out of every 7 schedule, we're going to go through this ritual of looking at our error to get better. And if every time you do that, it doesn't build up a little bit the trust of the team, it's a bad strategy. And so, coming out of that ritual, not having had anyone pay the price individually for the growth of knowledge, and then respecting that each person in that room was had to make themselves vulnerable, again, as an organization and as individuals, in order to become better, and that the process of uh, adopting that new self is itself a little bit of a challenge, and requires, just like you had a crossing in where you you know changed the mode you were in, you have to have a crossing out where you sort of cathartically experience the process of saying goodbye to the error and hello to my new knowledge.
Yeah.
And like I think studying how the Greek tragedy worked is very valuable on this.
Yeah.
And that the Greek tragedy had sort of the Apollonian performers on the stage, and they're doing the part of, you know, explaining that there's a hero and he believed a thing, and then life life uh, took him a different direction, and then he had a revelation, and that he saw the error, and then sort of reformed himself in some sort of way, or didn't, but met his humanity in some way. Okay, that's Greek tragedy, except Greek tragedy also had the chorus, and the chorus was the cathartic side of it. That is the reason I'm bringing it up, which is, you have to recognize that the process of creating a new self for the organization, of creating new knowledge, is hard, and it hurts, because again, you're being reminded of your mortality, in the process, and your fallibility. And, of course, we want to deny that, I think, in general. And so the having a cathartic moment at the end that allows us to just exhale and say, okay, I am human, and therefore I made errors and could be better, and I see that, and we will go forward together, is the way to cross back into ritual time. Interestingly, Greek tragedies were not performances; they were religious events. And so when we hear about them, because they were performed on a stage, we imagine them as akin to, um, going to a play, but they weren't.
I have about 18 things I want to unpack from what you just shared. So we may be having more conversations in the future about this. But one of the things that jumps out to me that feels really necessary is going back to what is the question that we're trying to answer here and what is the goal even of this ritual time, because a lot of times I think people walk into those conversations trying to prove or defend their worth as a person in this world, their value in this world. And if we pull that out, and that's not the question, that's not what we're trying to assess here. We're looking at how do we collectively get better and where did mistakes happen and all of that. But it feels very, very important because that then gives us freedom when we realize, like, oh, you're not assessing whether or not I'm impressive, whether or not I deserve to be here. We are actually trying to get better.
That's right. So I think there's one belief that is critical on this point, which is the sort of Popper Deutsch idea that knowledge is infinite. And if you, there are different definitions of knowledge over time that people have had. There's this like empty bucket theory of knowledge, which says there's a fixed amount of knowledge that exists in the universe, and I start with an empty bucket, or we collectively started with an empty bucket, and we're going around and picking up the knowledge and putting it in our bucket, and someday it'll be full. That's I'd say the default view historically of what knowledge is. And then there's another definition of knowledge, which is that it is infinite. And that the definition of, well, what knowledge is that knowledge is a better explanation, and that there is no limit to how good an explanation could be. And that's paradoxical in that it both says that there is no limit to what we could know, and that we could never know it all, right? Which is it's a very profound, um, insight, I think. And so if you go into ritual time with the sort of shared and fundamental understanding that knowledge is infinite, then the idea that you didn't have all the knowledge is not expensive. Because of course you didn't have all the knowledge. It, it's infinite. There is no such thing as having all the knowledge. Now, of course, we're human and we're going to feel vulnerable and we could have had a wrong position. I mean, that's all real. And this isn't to deny that. But the premise is right. If the infinite knowledge premise is set up correctly for someone to go into that with a generative mindset. I'm saying generative because this idea that the goal is to leave knowing more than we knew before, and that the the source of new knowledge, again back to Popper and Deutsch, is error correction. And what it says is that, and I believe this idea, that the source of future knowledge is the uh, correction in the the previous knowledge itself. In other words, it doesn't stack on top. It is not that we know back to the empty bucket. It's not that we know the things that we know, and now on the margin we are going to add additional knowledge. What it is that our future knowledge comes partly from reconstituting our old knowledge, always. So the seeds of what we will know are the errors of what we used to know. And so once this is a case where having that be legible is all upside. Having everyone understand that that's the nature of knowledge, that we are seeking, I mean, sure, we're seeking knowledge arbitrage where we can. If other people in the world have figured out something that we haven't accepted, we might as well take advantage. I mean, of course, that's obvious. Arbitrage is like that Warren Buffett quote. I'd admit I was an arbitrager, but my mom's in the room. Like, of course we should arbitrage where we can. But like, once you get past that one-time step up, and you're to the place of getting, actually fundamentally getting better, it requires everyone see it that way. See that we couldn't have known it all, and that the source of our improvement will be our error. And so it's a gift in some sort of way, and it's certainly not a fundamental flaw to be ashamed of.
Right.
And I think that I mean, it could be, but I think the main thing to be ashamed of, so to speak, is that you didn't take advantage of the knowledge you had in runtime. But once you're in ritual time, there's always going to be error.
Yeah.
And I think that back to the point about accountability for what inverting between the two. I think when you get into a mode where you say, hey, when we're out in the 6 days a week, your job is just to make the best use of it. And then it has error built into it. You're not responsible for that error. You're just responsible for using the car, driving the car. On Sunday, so to speak, we will take that car apart and look at it. And as long as you are part of tearing that down and looking at it, you're doing a good job. Just like as long as you're making the most of it the other 6 days of the week, you're doing a good job. And I think that is very clear to people. Like, that's a clear direction. And someone's like, well, I don't know how to be effective when we're and I think that the point is that there's a time and place for each side, and that instead of some people believing that they do a good job by tearing it down, and other people believe that they do a good job by taking advantage, instead everyone understands when to do each and how.
I remember when I first met you, Sean, when we were first thinking about working together, we had a couple of conversations. I sent you a proposal and we had a meeting. And the first thing you said on the call was, I hate your proposal. Like,
Oh, I'm charming. It's
it's
really an
lovely.
unbelievable skill.
Well, but I do remember there being a moment where I was like, okay. But also thinking, sweet, this guy gets one, he just gave me a gift because now I know where I can improve. But also, oh, he tells me the truth. That now I know, like, oh, this is a different kind of relationship. This is a person that doesn't beat around the bush very much. But I didn't know that we were in ritual time.
Oh yeah, well, I have things to improve. This is actually, I mean, in all seriousness, that has been a real revelation for me. So I am disagreeable, like, just, yeah, always. and like, disagreement has zero cost to me. Like, I don't, just personality wise, that's me. And of course, that disagreeability is the source of much knowledge generation. So that's good. Like, that has led to a lot of good things for me and others, and also the source of much pain for others. And the idea that I can sort of just have a time and place for it, and say, like, it is, and that not every time is the time and place for it, is, I think, revelatory is not too strong for me. That was a huge aha to me that I, could still do better at. I'm pretty imperfect on this one, but I mean, just this morning we had 6 o'clock this morning, we had a meeting that was, we literally did all the things I just said. We went through a crossing, we had the anti-scapegoat. It was like pretty ritually. And I could see in the virtual room, that the cost of my criticism was down by 90%. Like, just because that's the vessel for it. And man, if I could teach younger me that, man, because it used to be, I'm going to be self-indulgent here. So when I was younger, I actually had thought about this topic quite a bit. like as far back as maybe 20 years ago. And but my conclusion was quite wrong, I'd say. And it was just that, well, it was partly right. So my conclusion was that the only way I could get away with being myself would be to be funny.
Mm.
Like like that, because and that's the aesthetic point, basically. Basically I had to sort of raise the aesthetics of interaction high enough in terms of like style or, entertainment factor or whatever, to just but that was just to come out net neutral. Because I used to joke, I will spend every bit of equity I ever create in a conversation with criticism. And I mean, I said that for literally 20 years. And the idea that, like, oh, you can actually not pay the price all that's like you can instead say, I will create a space where that doesn't feel bad by syncing up on it. And the frankly, the aesthetic requirement to do that is far lower than just the whatever's required to pull off like impromptu criticism of everything like
Yes.
at any time. I can't believe it in hindsight that I like hadn't um well, this is just a meta point on the same, like that there wasn't like that all along. If this toggle between ritual and runtime was the key insight that I was missing. And it's interesting to sort of think back on the career and what could go right if you adopted that all along.
Well, my experience of you has been an interesting evolution because when I first met you, I thought, "Oh, this person doesn't like," but not in a bad way, but like he doesn't care what other people think. He has that's not the thing. He's gonna share his opinion, and that was like early conversations. And now I've worked with you for a bit, and I've seen you in action, and I've realized what you do is actually fueled because you care about people so much, about your team, about your customers, about the people that you interact with. And so it's been a joy to experience that in a deeper way, and even the criticism when in the right environment with the right aesthetics has been able to give lens into the fact that it's rooted in deep, deep care on playing the infinite game
Well, I
forever.
think that's true. I appreciate you saying it, and I am truly terrible at making that clear. I think that's the case. I mean, I do think that it's an interesting thought again, in the self-indulgent sort of zone. It is an interesting thought experiment to like if younger me had been asked the following question, I think I would have solved this a long time ago. So if the question, back to problem solving, if the question was, how could you pull off being critical if you weren't entertaining? I think I would have had a bunch of ideas 20 years earlier.
Yeah,
I just didn't ever think that like
right.
I just back to what problem to solve that I did as far back as probably 25 years ago say the secret to problem solving was knowing what problem you're solving always, and that the answers just reveal themselves. They're always easy, and the problem is not ever easy. Uh, and so it's just interesting that I think this is an example of that.
Um, Last question as we're gonna close out. What is a practical way that someone can enter that ritual space to have those conversations, to set up the aesthetics? What is like one piece of recommendation that you would give to someone who's ready to have those conversations in that way?
Well, I think what I would do is I would pick a truly big error, like real big problem, something where the the collective will accept that the error is true without any cost, right? Like something self-evidently problematic. And the reason I'm saying that is then you don't have to spend anything in order to get people there or to deal with sort of naysayers, etc. Um, so I'd pick something that was self-evident, that had large implications. Those two things. Um, and I would focus on that one problem and get a cross-functional collection of people together and say, we are going to mine this for every single bit of wisdom we can, and we're just going to do it in a meeting. So it's not going to be a constant din rattling around in the hallway, making us feel like garbage when we need to be running, right? But rather schedule the time and say that will be the time where we look at this real hard. Then in that time, and I'd give yourself plenty. The first 10 minutes of the meeting should be a good time. Doesn't matter how, just a fun conversation, like deliberate. If you're the leader, deliberately take a minute to get going, and don't take advantage of any opportunity that warms the room. That's why you need some time to do it. And then, yeah, figure out what the error is, because that's not always obvious. Sometimes it is. See if you can see through to what the better explanation is, and don't be too hasty about thinking that a suggestion that sounds good is the better knowledge. I mean, what knowledge is something that holds up to criticism over time, and so we shouldn't yeah, be too quick to adopt new knowledge. It's got to earn its way in. But I think that if you pick something that's big and self-evident, big as an implication wise and self-evident, and reserve time and ease everyone into a pleasant moment, again, raise the aesthetics of it, just the feeling of it. Um, and then, be very careful not to think that something different is something better. You know that something different is required, but which different thing is the question. Um, and then consolidate. It's like an accordion. That conversation is going to become very expansive and explore a lot of areas in order to reduce down to one or two key things, maybe one sentence insight. Um, and yeah, and then end in a way similar to how you began, with some catharsis to just sort of laugh at your own problems and fallibility, and be grateful for the team participating. I think that's what I do.
Well, we're gonna leave it there. We have more conversations to have, but, this has been wonderful. Thank you, Sean.
Thanks, Kristen.